Moments of Stillness, a collage of brief films of our natural surroundings, taken with a variety of cameras through different times of the day and different seasons. The words Moments of Stillness emerge from a close-up view of green grass, buttercups and dandelions. Hashtag Creative Lives under lockdown. The picture fades, white text against a black screen. This project was started during the first COVID-19 national lockdown. For Moments of Stillness, we asked people to take time out of their daily exercise to stop and appreciate what they saw around them. All film contributors are from members of the community in and around Sedgemoor. Fade to white. The camera pans across an expanse of meadow, with a misty tree line in the distance. Taller stalks of grass and white clover spike up from the tufts of green. A river sheltered by overhanging trees, casting their reflections on the still water, sparkling in the sun, which glints on the stony mud around its edges. A small, sturdy white dog muddles through reeds and grasses by a lake. A gaggle of ducks and cygnets forage in the water by tree roots on the margins of a lake, necks dipping and rising. The light catches the water as it ripples around them. The scene shifts to a woodland stream, where a low breakwater of rocks dams a shallow pond. The water scurries busily through the gaps in the stones over the rocky bottom. We soar into the treetops, their branches full of birdsong, as they wave gently against a blue, cloud-scattered sky. In the hedgerow, brown butterflies and busy bumblebees hover and land on an abundance of wild rose and pink campion blossom. Out of sight, the filmmaker's dog pants in the sunshine. Close-up of a swaying stem of purple buddleia flowers, where red admiral and tortoiseshell butterflies settle, their vivid wings wobbling in the breeze as they harvest nectar. The images dissolve into a garden scene and a luxuriant sunflower plant. Big yellow flowers with long petals and soft brown centres. Its broad grey-green leaves lift gently, providing landing platforms for industrious bees buzzing from flower to flower. The camera tilts down to view a patio pot, whose spiky plant hosts a vivid red multi-petalled flower. Emerald green runner-bean foliage flutters in the sun. A small cabbage-white butterfly basks quietly before lifting away on the gentle breeze. The rippling grey surface of a broad river flows past a gap in the foliage of overhanging trees. The scene evolves to one where a low camera pans over long, shallow concrete steps. Grass has found a precarious foothold in the steps' corners. The steps lead onto a narrow patch of sandy shore. A cluster of boats are moored beyond. The breeze rattles through masts and halyard ropes. The water view expands, and a calm seascape spreads out before us, where small flecks of seaweed idly tumble in the rippling wavelets over a beach at high tide. A line of 3 slender white poles marches through the sea towards the horizon, emphasising the distance and the immensity of water. On another shoreline, brown-tinged waves flow faster, lapping the foam-flecked sand. Clumps of short seagrasses poke up just offshore, and in the distance a low purple-tinged landmass lies under rolling white clouds. A wave swell builds. In a restless, mist-laden sea, the breakers gain momentum as they roll towards us. A relentless wall of spume-flecked water breaks in a crashing mass of white foam onto rain-darkened sand. The water retreats, only to build again and repeat its endless churning action. A sunlit stretch of inland water brings tranquillity, as softly flowing ripples kiss a bank of tumbled green leaves and grasses. A long-necked swan paddles with her brood along a waterway that winds between fields of lush grasses. They trail a path through patches of flat pondweed. Her glossy white mate is settled at the water's edge, preening in the warm sunshine. The camera pans across the verdant grasslands and blue skies. The preening swan extends his neck towards the sun and flaps his wings. Waggling his tail, he settles his feathers and leisurely swims after his mate. As he glides past us, the focus changes to a close-up of the silvery seed heads of the grasses lining the bank. The seed heads dance, tossed in the wind, against the background of sun-dappled green water. A camera lens looks towards the sun, through an umbrella of woodland foliage. Then down along the thick trunks of fallen trees by a stream. It focuses briefly on the black and white Jack Russell Terrier at the filmmaker's feet. 2 sheep, their bottoms towards us, graze among the fresh spring grass in an apple orchard. The rows of equally spaced trees are heavy with leaf. The white shapes of more sheep in the distance are almost hidden by the tall grass. A vista of rich, gold-topped pastureland. The full green hedges forming a patchwork pattern across distant rolling hills, under a pale, cloudy sky. Lush meadows are replaced by a broad, curving summit, littered by patches of flat grey shale among tufted heather. The sweeping camera pans over a horizon of sea and little hamlets nestling in purple-tinged moorland as it stretches away into the misty distance. There are white clouds high in the blue sky. An estuary, its reed beds edging brown mudflats, lies beyond a wire and post fence, awaiting the returning tide. Above them, an azure sky is painted with puffy clouds. A calm tide flows over an estuary, its yellowing reed beds half submerged in the brown water. A narrow spur of dark green land delineates the horizon, and a concealing layer of flat white cloud fills the broad expanse of sky. A breeze scurries through banks of reeds, the camera held low so that their darkly tossing feathery heads are silhouetted against a moody, threatening sky as crows rasp their harsh call. Melting into rich green as a breeze excites the leaves on the drooping branch of a tree, fluttering them so they display their silvery undersides. Part of a tree-lined hedgerow that curls away from us, bordering a grassy field. Flower stalks and leaves are silhouetted against a sky of grey, rain-filled clouds. A background to text. Cloudburst. The unheard sigh of roses. Raindrops patter wetly onto the calm surface of an estuary pool, stippling its water with dimples and shivering the grasses and reeds beside it. In the fresh aftermath, 3 fluffy brown ducklings putter about the flat green pads and poking white flowers of water lilies, their small beaks sifting the water, watched proudly by their mother. The tranquil sunlit sweep of a wide watercourse flows through pasture land, framed by the nearby branches of a hawthorn tree on the left. The meadow before us is dotted with cow parsley, the flat white flower heads lifting among the tall grasses. The scene fades out of focus. Melting into images of a fast-flowing weir, past a row of houses beyond overhanging feathery willow trees. The weir's concrete stepped sides are in the foreground, and the shallow slope curves away from us. The water flows across in a smooth sheen from the calm surface upstream, foaming slightly at the bottom as it ripples into the lower level. A narrow stream of water ebbs and sucks its way through rocks, where thousands of years of constant motion have worn a narrow gully, changing the landscape. The water washes up bits of broken brick, cracked into pieces. The grey rocks are mottled with patterns of black dried seaweed and tough tufts of grassy thrift. More foam-flecked waves lap and overlap against wide, shallow concrete steps, flowing up and over one step, only to retreat and drain away. The waves hit the step edge, channeling the water at right angles along the lower, submerged step towards us. An expanse of grey sea stretches beyond, mirroring a leaden sky. A sea change to a flat stretch of sand over which the incoming tide spreads in a series of broad, shallow waves, coloured by the honey-coloured sand beneath. The waters ebb and flow patterned with lace-like white foam. Wispy banks of cloud stretch across the pale blue sky. Words appear across the shifting water with the ebb and flow of the waves. Flood tide. The sea returns to polish her jewels. Close up to the very edge of a waterline, wavelets wash over a closely packed pebble beach, and the gleaming wet highlights their glowing pastel colours: grey-green, brown, mauve. Further out, the sunlight glints and dances on the rippling water and picks out the dimpled patterns on glistening sandbanks. A plump, brown and grey chaffinch perches high on top of a yew branch. The tree's spiky foliage is outlined against a cloudless blue summer sky. A huge flower meadow in full bloom stretches to faraway hills. Closely packed wildflowers become a vivid carpet of colour. Golden yellow marigolds, white oxeye daisies and bright blue cornflowers lift their heads to the sunshine that floods over them and makes them a vibrant, slowly waving blaze, merging into pure gold in the distance. Another view of white oxeye daisies, raggedy now, and interspersed with tall spiky grass. You sit among them. They rise up past your shoulders to the warm blue sky, long stems wafting gently in the soft breeze. In an urban landscape, the close-up of a large garden snail at the filmmaker's feet. tracing its earnest path across knobbly concrete. Horns waggling, grey lozenge body extended under a brindled brown curved shell. A clump of purple vetch and yellow toadflax, their tall flower stems packed with rows of tiny individual flowers, bob gently in a hedgerow. A white-tailed bee gathers nectar, bumbling from flower to flower. In pin-sharp close-up, a honeybee works away at a small patch of bright yellow in a little hollow in the cracked, dry stump of an old tree trunk, as if making a nest. Its little black body, covered in thin, silky golden fur, quivers as it works. A dead leaf has settled in one of the hollows, and a pink petal in another one. Garden flowers bloom in profusion, filmed close up. Scarlet poppies, golden marigolds, behind grey-stemmed lavender. They tremble as the bees work them, feasting on their bounty. The camera, buried in the bright green spear-shaped leaves of luxuriant grass. Only to cut away to the patient snail again, still doggedly inching along his concrete journey. A panoramic shot sweeps across from a green hilltop, looming above a flat plain of fields. Over the edge of a stark headland, guarded by the ruins of a square concrete gun emplacement, a rusty single rail track leading towards it. Far out to sea, an island rises like a small brown hump from the slate-grey waves. The reflections of grasses tossed by the wind show dark on the cracked clay surface of a sun-dried coastal path. Words appear. High wind. Faster and faster the shadow dance. The wind flows on now, teasing sandy dunes, rustling through the clumps of coarse sedge grass and lifting eddies of dry sand. Unhindered, the wind blows a constant thin brown film of sand towards us, across a bare sandy shore, over the long patterns of narrow ridges left by the waves. A bank of rough grasses rises on the right. Distant figures walk along the beach. The swaying fronds of reeds, their delicate feathery heads, in brown and beige shades, echoing the colour of the sand. They flex and bow in the gusts of wind, as tall as the filmmaker. Autumn hues have just started to tint the leaves in a thicket of close-growing ferns and shrubs that form a splash of green below the slender trunks of grey-leafed trees. The camera travels through dense, ancient woodland, dappled with green and gold. Broad-leafed beeches and tall pines, ivy clinging to their slender trunks, reach up towards the light. The camera dips to a narrow stream trickling past our feet. It follows the stream's curving path, then lifts again to focus on the sloping far bank, piled with tangled vegetation and bare skeleton branches fallen over many years. A forest of saplings rises from a steep woodland bank, their slender trunks rising like spindly legs into a canopy of foliage, splashed with the gold, russet and red of autumn. Sheltered from the wind in a deep gorge, the leaves hang brilliant and motionless. Moving among an endless vista of narrow tree trunks, so tall they soar up out of sight. Some are grey, some smoky brown or soft green, their bark smooth, their trunks embraced by dark green strands of ivy. They seem to march away from us as the camera swings past and back down to the rocky stream. For the third time, we return to our snail pedestrian, horns flexing, mottled body elongated, as he pursues his tenacious course, the slimy trail behind him tracing a record of his journey of a few centimetres over the concrete. We return to the riverbank. The broad, wavy-edged leaves of an oak tree frames the right-hand side, dappled by the sunlight reflecting on the slowly flowing water. A metal handrail moves into focus below the scene, providing a rigid man-made contrast to the soft, natural contours. The sun shines too on a black, curly-haired cockapoo dog as it noses through the vegetation by the side of a tarmac footpath, flanked on the left by a high wooden planked fence. From the shade of green foliage, the film follows the dog as it joins the filmmaker and moves out of the picture. Raindrops patter onto a pond's surface, viewed through slender, swaying willow branches. A little black coot swims past, and a flock of small white birds swoop and wheel before settling on the water. The image dissolves to a lake. The still water glistens darkly, patched with wide, flat clusters of water lilies. A solitary swan paddles idly, eyes on the water, dipping its orange beak into trailing weeds as it forages just under the surface, the curve of its slender neck reflected in the water. A lone young deer hovers, nervous and watchful, on a rough cart track that runs between tall grasses and a few small trees. Poised for flight, it turns, hesitates, and comes closer, head dipping and bobbing, as the image fades. Into a mass of white-petalled oxeye daisies, dappled in the sunshine, their yellow centres glowing as they sway in the breeze, casting their shadows on the sun-dried grass below. More vivid flowers dwell by a wooden fence in a garden. Scarlet geraniums erupt from a carpet of miniature apricot-coloured petunias, and the flat little flowers of delicate blue moss phlox amidst lush green foliage. A single Japanese anemone flower. 8 broad oval petals, the pastel pink of dawn, spread out from a ring of golden stamens clustered around its green globe centre, alongside a small dark purple bud. Echoing its other name, the windflower, it tosses gently from side to side, the sunlight transforming its subtle hues. A wide expanse of ocean spreads across the whole vista under a hazy blue sky. In the foreground is a beach of large round pebbles washed smooth by the sea, tinged in subtle shades of grey and crimson. The calm sea laps over the pebbles at our feet, seeping forward in a flurry of white foam. A pink sunset reflects on a still watercourse between silhouetted banks of trees. A rose-tinted sky over the sea tinges the waves, but leaves the landmass a dark silhouette on the left. Seagulls swoop near the shore, dark shapes fluttering against the sky. Golden light paints wispy clouds streaking across the sky. The orange glow of the descended sun fringes dark clouds that bubble below. Closer, pale light edges the cobalt blue of swelling cumulus clouds. A broad, flat seashore. The low sun bleaches the sky cream as it sinks towards the horizon, sending a path of light shimmering across the water and the little ripples at the sea's edge. Long shadows throw into relief the ridges and patterns in the damp sand. Seagulls dart above the waves. A murmuration of starlings flows and wheels in a cloud above misty grey water and spiky reed beds, twisting in an ever-changing pattern of loops and turns. Thousands of birds move as one in perfect synchronization. Watched from a hide, the mass veers towards the camera and pinwheels overhead. It fills and darkens the scene, doubled by their reflections on the still water below. The cloud parts and rejoins like a rush of wind. As if at an unseen signal, the birds turn and melt away, leaving the evening sky empty. Glowing black and white infrared nighttime images. A snuffling hedgehog gobbles up food, nosing under a plate to reach the tasty bits, its little beady eye glinting. On a driveway, a dog fox, eyes glowing large and white in the infrared, sniffs and hoovers up some scattered biscuits. He looks towards us, ears pricked warily. But the biscuits are too great a temptation, and he carries on eating. Colour returns as purple and orange swathes of sheet lightning dance along the horizon, in counterpoint to the thunder, illuminating the shapes of trees and the mass of roiling clouds that fill the night sky. The flashes of lightning increase as jagged white forks of lightning join the display, darting down from the dense clouds to spark onto the earth below. The storm rumbles across the tumultuous sky. Big white words appear, moments of stillness. The words fade to the end credits. Thank you to all the submitted videos to Moments of Stillness. Contributors to the film, alphabetically: Liz Ashwell, Krista Belcher, Yolanda Bentham, Hel Brody, Paul Chapman, Poppy Cool, Ruth Cool, Jackie Curtis, Mike Dannon, Denise Hickey, Terry Higginbottom, Kim Hill, Laura Hilton, Liz Kelly, Eileen Long, Nadja McDevitt, Jessie Maddox, Sally Mann, Lee Penny, Denise Rogers, Joy Russell, Peter Vines, Vicky Wilkinson, Naomi Wilson, Chris Yard. Editing, Nadja McDevitt. Music and sound design, Daniel Birch. Moments of Stillness team, Nadja McDevitt, Leila Browning, Seed Sedgemore. Poems by Grace Galton. With special thanks, Laura Hilton, Scott O'Hara, Richard Tomlinson, Dan Gale, Create You, Homes in Sedgemore, YMCA, The Engine Room, Somerset Libraries UK, and all our friends and supporters too numerous to mention. A white oblong lifts into view with various logos of supporting organisations. Seed, Creative People and Places, Lottery Funded, Arts Council of England, Creative Lives Under Lockdown, commissioned by Seed, Your Creative People plus Places project. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @Seed Sedgemore, seedsedgemore.com. This audio description by Sightlines has been written by Julia Grundy and Margaret Spittles and recorded by Julia Grundy, with sound engineering by Gary Giles.